Welcome. Welcome all. Yeah. How you doing tonight? Happy to see you on the next edition of Being the Light, the show that's all about ergonomic ways to keep your energy as bright as it possibly can be. And tonight's topic is going to be a topic that is near and dear to my heart since I was a young buck, and a mentor passed this on to me, and that is the concept of being proactive, not reactive. And I've got an amazing guest on tonight, and we'll be discussing that. And before we dive into that, I wanted to. Jacob, I know I'm kind of throwing you a curveball here, but I want to talk about the abundance crystal, and would like to show those pictures from last night if we could. I'm going to show the crystal for a second. This is a pretty cool thing. This is a resin mold from this particular crystal. And crystals have been part of my life since I was in my early 20s. And my exploration and experimentation with them has been profound. And you know, they really are amazing conductors, holders, projectors of energy in many different ways. As a matter of fact, quartz just sitting there, most of the planet is made of silicon quartz. And just quartz, just on its own, is always giving off a little low level charge called piezoelectric energy. So not long ago, I got into somebody turned me on to these things called organites, and this is one of them that someone made for me. And they're little resin things, and they come in many shapes, and in cubes and circles and spheres and pyramids and stuff. And people put all kinds of different, like, quartz crystals or different other minerals, and like this one's got a nifty bunch of copper on it, and a copper spiral going into the center. And I really had, you know, I always considered resin just plastic, and in my own energetic practice, I never really took it very seriously. As a matter of fact, when you had charged something else up and you were trying to make sure that charge didn't bleed, you always put it in something plastic so it doesn't get in or out. So I didn't really think much about that as an energetic tool until I started experimenting with it. And the resin itself is super amazing, actually. And the great thing about it is that it is really easy to charge, and it takes a charge really well that you put into it with your intent. And the glorious thing about it is, like a regular quartz crystal, like in 90 days, it'll start to bleed that charge out. You got to give it another bump up. But I've been running one for about 6 months, and the degree of bleed from it is just almost non-existent. And so you could really do a lot of long-term work with resins and stuff like this. So anyway, I wound up working on this with my erstwhile partner, Jacob, and came up with a crystal that has an overall intent, in this case, abundance. And then each one of these little marks on the side is a sigil. And sigils are condensed graphic representations of a mental intent, charged with, and you charge them with energy, and those actually work in the energetic field and make that happen. So, each crystal has 6 sides. So we did 6 different aspects of abundance, an abundance of love, an abundance of wealth, an abundance of knowledge, an abundance of bliss, and so each one of these is kind of driving the overall concept of abundance. And I just sort of charged it up and put it to work this weekend. And like next day, I actually started seeing some stuff. Coincidence? Possibly, probably, but kind of an encouraging little sign. So we'll see where this goes with this. So I wanted to show some light paintings that I did of this crystal. Can you pop those up, Jacob? Yeah. And what's really exciting about it, yeah, rock on to the next one. There you go. What's really exciting about it is Jacob hand carved these crystals, or these sigils into this, and he did it, for using a Dremel drill by hand without any kind of like guide work or anything. They're pretty amazing. Hey, go back to that one for a second. Yeah. You can see the crystal reflects the sides inside. The crystal reflect the sigils from other sides, and what's going on in the front is a combination of a sigil in the front and a sigil in the back. So I'm really excited to see about where the 3 dimensionality of this goes and whether that makes any difference. Yeah, let's rock on the next couple. Yeah, let's motor by this one. Yeah. And these are, I love using light painting. Yeah, this one I really love. The face and the top of his face of the crystal is just crazy, and those weird little light. I wish I could tell you I did those on purpose, but I have no idea what those little light spots are at the top. I didn't do that on purpose, and I used a fiber optics brush on this, so I guess it just straight hair flipped around in just the right way. All right, let's motor on. Yeah, there you go. And last but not least, still, yeah, should be 1 or 2 more. Wow, I sent too many, didn't I? Yeah. Yeah. So super fun. If you have any interest in looking into sigils, there's a lot of really good information out there. And last night on the Angel channel, um, I did a really detailed description of how to do a simple sigil, or like the simple sigils that are on the face of that crystal. So if you have any interest in that, check out the Angel channel show from last evening, and you can get a dive in. And anything that, I love throwing out little tidbits of things to practice on and try. And that's really the intent of this, is for these things to be little snippets of inspiration to let you see what's actually possible. And so many things that we write off as impossible, not only are they possible, they're the best things for us in so many ways. Next week on the show, we're going to be having my longtime friend and erstwhile companion, Raphael Kamensky from Vienna. He's a scholar and a YouTube guy, and deeply into magic. As a matter of fact, he was instrumental in helping me get my decks out. He like proofread them and like really immersed himself in them, and has been pretty much immersed in them for a long time now, and has helped spread the word across the world with decks in people's hands, and just some of the craziest places. And what's really kind of nuts about both those decks, I designed a tarot deck, the Wizard of Oz Tarot, and the Deus Angelus deck, which is what the Angel Show is about. And both of those decks have been out like 12 years now. And the way that they wind up circling back to me just continues to amaze me in so many ways, that I'm an artist, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight: artists' rights and creativity. Um, but seeing how those things manifest in where you're going is kind of a fun and amazing way to roll. So anyway, Raphael will be on next week, and we will be talking about sigils and symbols, rather, and language, and the way that like the Hebrew alphabet. Man, I just got discovered something recently. I got deeply into cymatics, which is how different frequencies form waves that, you can pour light topping of sand on top of a piece of plastic and play a specific note at a frequency, and it will make that same complex shape every single time. It's kind of like sound crop circles. And cymatics is a really interesting area of exploration. I'm deeply into how sound affects your health and your mental mindset. And Raphael actually turned me on to this, where they have been doing cymatic things with sounding the Hebrew letters, and that those letters have really specific shapes and forms, just like the musical notes. And when they do that with English and a bunch of other Western languages that are derivative, that effect doesn't exist at all. So kind of crazy. All right. So the topic of proactive versus not reactive, it was a gift given to me like early in my 20s by one of my mentors, and I really took it to heart, and he was a living example of that for me. So I saw how that manifested in your life when you really took that on. And proactive does not necessarily mean total control, and that gets confused a lot. Especially these days, and with the kind of age of energy that we're moving into, it's a much less regimented, specific, disciplined kind of time. And yet at the same time, you can't really just sit around and wait for things to happen. If you do, you wait for things to happen to you, not for you. And having a life plan does not mean that you're trying to be too rigid and controlled, and that you're not letting the universe reveal for you. It's kind of been my experience over too many decades to even contemplate right now that it is true that you need to be connected to the source. And when you are connected to that universal energy that we all swim in, and you obey the laws of energy and the rules of how energy actually works, so simple. And when you get in that flow, things take on a really much more smooth and happy way of resolving. But that does not mean that you can't have any desires and plans and try to push that towards that area. And what I've found is that when you get these inspirations and you go, oh man, I really want to try that. Oh man, I really want to go after that. And you do your level best to go after it with all your intent and an open heart and the right intentions behind it, that even if that particular plan doesn't manifest, the fact that you've tried to push forward and you're moving energy towards your involvement and your growth, and you're coming to understanding about life and yourself and the world around you, the universe will lay out new plans that are like even so much better than the ones you originally thought you were going to pursue. And the control aspect for me comes in there, because instead of rigidly adhering, like, you know, it's good to come up with a plan. Like, okay, that's a great idea. How does that actually happen in the real world? And you come up with this real plan, and you start to execute that thing. Well, if you rigidly adhere to that's the exact way, that's the only way it can be, that's the exact way it has to be, then you miss out on miracles that happen along the way. I was a creative director and advertising guy and a commercial director for many, many years of my life. And I would spend a lot of time getting the storyboard just right and everything on that, like every second accounted for. And the more prepared you were for that, the more that you were ready to actually execute that when you actually got on the set and some accident, some miraculous little coincidence, some synchronicity of sound and somebody walking by that wasn't really planned in that. Those were the really, incredible miracles that made stuff special and unique and gave it some flavor that you never would have anticipated beforehand, so there's a fine balance between pushing and coming up with the plan and being able to be flexible and like water along the course and to flow with what gets revealed and how to go. All right, so enough of me talking. I'm going to introduce my guest tonight, and I'm over the moon happy to have her with me. She is a longtime friend, an adopted family member. Love her and her husband very, very much. And she's a really great example, in my opinion, of proactive, not reactive. And her name's Jessica Shraybman. I call her Jess, and she's a badass Miami attorney. I knew her from when she was a little whippersnapper in college, deciding whether she was going to be an artist or a lawyer. So she sort of combined them both, and she's become a really amazing corporate attorney and specializing in intellectual properties. And where we're going to dive in tonight, because I know a lot of you guys out there are artists and light painters in my community and writers and anyone creating stuff, is how to protect your work in this world. The internet brought out a whole level of like, what WTF about how to protect your work and where it goes and who has access to it and can grab it. And, it's been kind of crazy for me to see my work like go, put something out and it comes back on somebody else's work with them claiming that they did it. And, it's just a very confusing world out there. So we're going to ask her for some tips on how, best ways for artists to protect their work and to actually make sure their stuff remains their stuff. And then, we'll get in later in the show. We're going to talk about the whole AI revolution and how that is just, it's a whole area that there are no precedents for already. Those are being determined and set even as we speak. At this very moment, and what that means for, who owns what. Well, what is AI created stuff actually copyrightable? There's a whole area there, so we'll get into that. And before I bring her on, I would really love to, Jacob, can you bring up that picture I sent you right before the show? Sorry that was so late. Oh, Jess, very creative person, and this is one of her best creations. And I just wanted to send out heartfelt congratulations to Jess and Aldridge and baby Atlas. And this is isn't he cute? All right, so without further ado, my good friend Jessica Shraybman.
Hi.
Jess, what's up? Good to see you.
Always a pleasure. How are you?
Thanks for coming on. I'm excited to dive into the topics tonight, man. And how's baby Atlas?
Adorable, super sweet. Yeah, just the best creation I have yet to create.
What's the biggest surprise so far? This is months ago. When did this happen?
10 weeks. So just
10 weeks, man.
2 months ago. Yeah.
So what's your biggest surprise so far?
Honestly, the biggest surprise is just how much I've been loving it. I just couldn't in my wildest dreams have imagined that I could love somebody or something just so deeply and endlessly, and it's just been amazing. Coolest experience I've ever had, and totally unexpected.
I was just gonna say we had so many garden talks, man, and you were like, I don't know.
I
With
know.
good reason. And I have to give you props. You thought about it for a long time, and that you weighed lots of options. And when that you took a long time to decide, and when you did, you definitely made it happen.
Yeah, thank you. And listening to you talk about your mentor who taught you about being proactive as opposed to reactive. I also remember one of our garden talks way back in the day when you were kind of nudging me to be more proactive and less reactive with my relationship with life. And so from one mentor to another, I appreciate you passing down the wisdom.
My pleasure. I hope you're passing it on as well. The legacy needs to continue.
When I am a wise when I am a wise person with a young whippersnapper to pass that on to, I will absolutely.
Awesome. So, expand on your experience with that concept, and how is that actually revealed in your life on a daily basis?
Yeah, as I was listening to your intro, it was really striking me, especially what you're talking about, how, being proactive doesn't necessarily mean having control over the situations or the outcomes. And professionally, recently, I dealt with exactly that situation where for a while leading up to giving birth, for example, I was really being very proactive and putting the pieces into place so that I could take a maternity leave and step away from the business for a couple of months. And then kind of in the 11th hour, some things happened within the business, and I had to make some really big and unexpected decisions, which on the one hand, unfortunately resulted in me not being able to take a maternity leave. I gave birth on Friday and I was working on Monday.
Wow.
But at the same time, gave me the opportunity to get a lot of clarity on certain aspects of the business and an opportunity to make improvements. And I think a lot of it, again, like hearing your intro, what it's reminding me of is really like what the Stoics teach, which is, not trying to control situations and outcomes, but being able to see them for what they are and respect them for what they are and make adjustments, and to keep moving with things so that you can be like the water, to use your words.
That was such a difficult lesson for me
Yeah.
because, I would visualize it and I would get this whole plan. And once I was in place, I was certain that was the way it had to happen. And any deviation from that would just throw me into this like, and you wind up, most of the time, if I put enough effort and intensity into it, I could ram what I really wanted to have happen through and wound up missing like this opportunity that
Yeah.
was like rolling right by, that had I been flexible, I could have jumped on that train and like done so much better with it. That
Yeah.
was very difficult for me to release. And finding that balance, it sounds easy when you say it, but it's not all that easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And flexibility is that word was kind of like on repeat in my mind as I was listening to you talk about it. And, unless you're a Taoist monk, it's hard not to have the feelings and feel the emotions when you do invest so much of your time and your energy and maybe even like financial resources into putting a plan into play. And then when it doesn't work out the way that you had anticipated, to be able to say, like, to not have the feelings that I know I had when I was going through it recently, of anger and disappointment and frustration, and also wanting to retreat into the sense of like, why do I put so much energy into making these plans when it's so much out of my control and can go completely not according to plan? So,
Exactly.
so why not just live
And
more?
honestly, doesn't it show up most of the time that it never goes exactly the way you had
Oh
planned?
my goodness.
Ever.
It's it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. And definitely coming out of the experience that I just had, like in the business, I personally have been going through a bit of a, you know, I won't say a crisis, but just like a reassessment of, you know, maybe I should just live more reactively and just, I don't know. When I had fewer responsibilities, like when you first met me and I was in college and I had virtually no responsibilities to anyone or anything, it was so easy to live whimsically, definitely more difficult now. And again, like finding the right balance between being committed and having a plan and working towards something and still having the flexibility and being able to be reactive. Like in a way, that's what flexibility is. It's
Exactly.
being able to experience and react, not necessarily emotionally, but to respond, to work with what you get.
Well, some most of the time these days, you know, the show's all about energy, right? And one of the precepts and laws of the way energy works. And this has been a really glorious trip for me because, I've studied so many religions, so many disciplines, and they're all have kernels of spirituality and connection, but they're also, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but they're also like covered with dogma of the cultural place where they developed and the time that they developed. And there's all this human stuff attached to it that has really nothing to do with energy. And
Mhm.
energy in its purest form, it's like it follows certain rules. And I love that because the man that hates rules, these rules are really good and they're really not bendable. The
Mhm.
best, my favorite rules are the ones that are made to be broken. But you can't break these rules and not suffer the consequences in extreme fashions.
Yeah.
So when you understand that whatever frequency it is that you're vibrating in, what you're thinking about, what consumes your intention, you're sending out into the energy field. And there is absolutely nothing that can happen except a reflection back of situations that offer opportunities for learning in the middle of that. Rarely pleasant,
Mhm.
sometimes, but
Mhm.
most of the time, it's like whatever level you're at in your development and wherever you've been able to push it, those things go out. And as you learn lessons and move up and continue to grow, it's like I know you've experienced this where you've like changed your vibe and you're like in this different zone now for a little while, and people that were around in your sphere at that time just kind of drop off. It's
Mhm.
not like you have fights or anything, but like the energetic connection, we all have lessons for each other. They have lessons for you, you have reciprocal lessons for them as well. And when that lesson could, uh, construct has been fulfilled, then they just go away. And now you're vibrating at this new level, and all these new people start to show up. The most extreme version of that was me leaving Miami, and
Mhm.
man, everything in my life went away then. Like everything I cared about left. I sold all my stuff. I moved out of a place I loved. My bonsai garden, like everything, my self-esteem, like, man, I died. And it was kind of like this energetic karmic flush, this like, I wrote a check to Saturn to pay the bill. And when I got to my new location, I was like, I felt different, like I'd been reborn, and
Mhm.
my energy was different, and I was exuding like joy, which is how I got out of that situation to begin with, man. I don't know if you remember this, but Og's teacher sent me this message about like changing like I thought I was dying. I thought the universe was giving me every indication that, dude, you've had a really good ride, time to check out, man. So get your shit in order.
Yeah.
And I got this message back from Og's teacher, and he's like, there's one way, a singular way, and that's to change your mental mindset from despair, which was deep and pervasive, and change that to joy. And I laughed out loud. I fell off my little chair. I'm like, you've got to be. That was sounded like the most impossible thing in the world right then. But I tried. I said, what do I have nothing to lose. So let's give it the best effort. And I pushed that stuff towards joy, and it really wouldn't go anywhere. It was too far. It was like the opposite end of the spectrum. But I was able to push it to gratitude. And, honestly, even in that space, I could look back on all the crazy stuff that's happened in my life and the people I've met and the things I've gotten to see and do. And man, I can't be anything but grateful for that, the whole ride. And even the difficult parts, like I grew from, I like gained from. They didn't own me and become my trauma train, man. So I was grateful for those too. And I was able to hold that. And once I like stayed there for a little bit, I was able to go, wow, and get it up to joy. And once that happened, literally within days, you remember how hard it was for me to find a new place to live? Like
Yeah.
it was impossible. I had like 3, 4 of them like just disappear out from under me. And Gary was getting ready to sell the house, and it was like crunch time. And I was able to like get it to that joy thing. And literally 3 days later, I had a place in a
Mhm.
place I'd never set foot in. I'd never been in Sebring, and I'd never set foot in this apartment. And I just said, yeah, let's go do it. And that's like the ultimate give up control for me, man. That was the ultimate, like, okay, I tried everything. Here's what got revealed. Okay, let's fuck it. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so my energy here has been so different. And the people that have shown up, we've been communicating around the time. It's just, I've met so many new people and had so many experiences with um, life being really different. And
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on that ramble.
No, not at all. I mean, I bared witness to that experience for you. And I, honestly, I think I probably shared it with you then too, but there was a while that I was worried for you too, because I saw that glimmer in you. And I remember having the conversation and genuinely being worried and feeling like, B, you have so much more, like this the death that you were experiencing and describing. I was really praying that it was it was like the death card in the tarot, and that it was just a transformation and not a final physical death. And I mean, to bring it back to our theme of the difference between doing all you can to implement something and to take charge and to be the creator of your life, and then also being able to have the wisdom to recognize when something is completely out of your control, and in a way being able to be proactive in that sense by willingly surrendering to the circumstance.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part to get, I
It
think.
is. I mean, sometimes I actually recently had a dream that was very much on point with this theme, where, long story short, I was running away from something, and I don't know what it was. It didn't matter, but the feeling behind it was I knew that whatever it was that it was futile. it was a futile effort in me running away, but I kept trying. I kept running away, but I kept feeling the presence catching up with me or chasing me, whatever, until eventually I got to what was like, I was in a field and there was a white fence, not like a picket fence, but like a fence. And I recognized that on the other side of that fence was a completely new existence. And even though I didn't know what was beyond, there was still a sense of peace in my acceptance that I needed to just embrace and approach and cross the fence. So sometimes we're our worst enemies, or maybe we need to exhaust ourselves.
I think that's it.
To get to that. Yeah.
I think that's it. I think playing out faulty programming, it's one thing to know it. It's another thing to have lived it, and now you grok it in fullness.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any way that you can just intellectually make that leap with that degree of intensity and depth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting how we think of them as two separate things. Like, are you being proactive or are you being reactive? But I'm just now realizing that a lot of times they're one and the same.
It's the balance of those two things and where they are on the always swinging pendulum.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a new perspective for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't you love when those layers open up and you have this moment of realization and it goes,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've had so many, you and me and Aldrich had conversations about the simulation. And man, I want to get him on the show and talk about that because I've had so many avenues about
You mean
that.
that like our existence is a simulation?
Yeah, exactly. That we're living in this crazy simulation.
Yeah.
I've had so many, every time I put that filter over how things are, it's the only one that works all the time. It couldn't possibly be real. So let's talk about, I'd like to talk about your law practice and what you're doing and tell us a little bit about what you're into and your specialties, and I'd like to hear.
Yeah, well, so like you mentioned, it was a very big and difficult decision for me to not only go to law school, but to become an attorney. You probably remember I was like, I'll go to school because I like going to school and learning things, but I'm probably never going to be an attorney. I've always really been drawn to the arts, particularly the visual arts. And you were always one of my favorite art teachers in my life. I'm forever grateful for our time together. And I am lucky enough that in my practice, I've been able to work with a lot of creatives. Like you said, I've been able to merge those two things, what I'm good at and what I'm passionate about. So more and more these days, we're really honing in on working with creatives and turning creatives into badass business owners is what we say. It's been my experience with creatives that they can have, and of course, this isn't a blanket statement for all creatives, but a lot of creatives can have a difficult time either shifting between the left brain and the right brain, between the creativity and the business, or they feel that being in the business mindset can annihilate the creative brain. And so they don't think that they can do both or that they should do both.
That's a huge issue. Yeah.
It is indeed. And I've seen so many instances where creatives get taken advantage of, or they enter into deals that cause headaches. They do a bunch of work. They don't get paid. They are demanded to do things that are way outside of the expectations that were set at the beginning of a project. Just so many things, not to mention the ways that artists have been taken advantage of, like when entering into contracts, whether they're management contracts or agency contracts, things like that. So it's been a real gift to
And
me.
you're talking about artists, visual artists, musicians, like the
Musicians,
writers, the whole spectrum.
yeah, marketing agencies, graphic designers, photographers, videographers, producers, all of the above. And so it's been a real blessing to me as an attorney to be able to bring the business side to the creatives and to be able to form partnerships and help people properly, I mean, basically stand up for themselves when they need to, secure their rights, enforce their rights, and be able to, like generate a comfortable living off of their art and their skills.
It's next to impossible these days in this environment. It's getting crazier and crazier and crazier. And it
Mhm.
seems like um, because of the proliferation of everyone having, access to, AI, Photoshop, and like all that stuff now, that like being able to put a value on your art that is any kind of reflects any kind of real effort that you put into it is next to impossible these
Yeah,
days.
yeah, and to be able to distinguish between real art, and this is a bit of my own opinion, but like real art and just like phony art, and also value. I've worked with so many visual artists who like get lowballed because people don't understand how much time it takes to actually create the work. Like,
Right.
because now it's so easy to type in a prompt and get a graphic illustration of something. And there are definitely pros and cons. Like, I won't, as much as I'm like a technophobe and, I'm definitely skeptical about AI. I won't diss it entirely. There are benefits to everything. Um, but I definitely side with all of the artists who are now dealing with like the copyright issues and fighting it, raging against the machine to
How do you
protect.
do that? I mean, what like somebody's got a volume of work that they want protected. I know a DJ in town who has a ton of stuff that he wants to like protect. How does somebody go about doing that, that maybe not have corporate level, funds to go do? I mean, what's the easiest way to make that happen?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about like copywriting, for example, to register works for copyright is actually fairly inexpensive compared to other business and legal fees and things. The filing fees are very reasonable. The process isn't too difficult. It doesn't take a long time. Technically, you don't need to register creations for copyright because by virtue of creating something, it's like a birthright. Like you already own the copyright.
Okay.
But when it comes to if you ever have to enforce your rights, that's where you do need a registration. And there are some rules around when the works need to be registered in order to be able to claim like some statutory damages and things like that. And it can become not economically feasible for somebody that's constantly producing work. Like to obtain a copyright on everything can get expensive. It adds up. But even with that, there are options because you can register groupings of works together and things like that. So it's usually like a cost benefit analysis, and also depends on like how the artist is planning to use and publish their work and things like that. However, when you're talking about how can you protect it, like just generally in the world, because if we're going to, if we're going to publish our works on any sort of online platform, anything like that, it kind of becomes vulnerable. That's the, Google image issue. Like you can search for things and things come up and people think, oh, well, if it's on Google, that means it's in the public and I can use it and that's okay. And And that's certainly not the case.
Yeah, and like I've had my light paintings like robbed out of Facebook, man. What and I've tried putting watermarks on them, but what is that actually? It's the people. It's like you have to just put it out there, accepting it's going to be stolen.
I mean, but you can certainly like pursue that. You can always send like a cease and desist. You can send a demand letter. I mean, of course, like some of these things do require financial resources. Um, and in my experience, a lot of times people do it unintentionally because, again, they have the mistaken understanding or the mistaken belief, not even understanding because it's a misunderstanding, but they have the mistaken belief that if it's available online, that you can use it.
Right.
And that's not the case. If you ever find that somebody is using your work and selling it in some way, or using it to promote something that they are doing that is allowing them to make money on a product they're selling or a service they're providing, you likely have financial damages that you can pursue against that person. And under the copyright law, there are ways that you can recover those damages and sometimes even like related attorney's fees.
Hmm. So I've often been told that if you have I've got the wizardofod.com website. I've been
Mhm.
told if I load stuff on that website that it is at least minimally copyrighted. Is that is that actually true?
Not in terms what that does if you have do you mean like on the bottom of the page you have like copyright Wizard of Oz
Right,
2024?
right.
So those types of disclaimers put people on notice that you have the copyright. But again, you have a copyright regardless of anything. You created it, you have the copyright. But again, that's different from getting a registration with the US Copyright Office.
Have you experienced anybody involved in the NFT world and that whole scenario? I kind of understood that the birth of that was about once you make an NFT and it becomes its own little token, then you own that forever and other people sell it and make money and you get a piece of that. Have you experienced anything with that? Is that a workable, viable?
Yeah, so when NFTs really came on the scene a few years ago, I was definitely caught up in the whirlwind of it, and I worked with a few companies that were establishing NFT platforms and selling NFTs. And I mean, NFTs were used in so many different ways. And the one that you're referring to was kind of like a chain of title in the sale of artwork. Um, Personally, I wasn't feeling super great about NFTs. I think that blockchain has a lot of amazing capabilities. I think there's still a lot to be developed and there are a lot of kinks to work out. And
Not a
there's
case.
definitely been issues of like wallet theft and things like that. So I
Ton of scams. Me and
also,
Brandon almost got like in one about 2 months ago, man. That was
oh
like
no.
good. Yeah, man, they were good. And it was just at the last second, man. We were like, okay, let's check this. And oh man, it was total scam.
Oh man, well, I'm so glad that you caught that in time. But so to answer your question, I eventually came to a place where I kind of for myself decided that it's something I believe in expertise. I in life I am a Jill of all trades. I have so many interests and I want to experience and learn as much as possible in this world. Professionally, I am committed to my expertise, and the digital I decided blockchain was not a direction I wanted to move in. So I don't have a ton of direct experience with it.
So somebody has a volume of work, they want to protect that. What's the first step?
So if it is not yet published, you can apply for copyright registration for the collection. There are collective works and there are also group registrations. And there's a limit on how many pieces, like for example, if you have a group of photographs or a group of paintings, things like that, again, that have not been published, so you haven't made them like publicly available, then you can register them kind of as a bundle, which again is there's some nuance to it, but it can be a great way to get multiple copyright protections in a single filing.
Cool.
For people that have just a huge library of work and they want to protect as much as possible, it depends on budget. We have some clients that are like, budget is no issue, and we apply for all the copyright registrations. For other of our younger entrepreneurs, our smaller artists and creatives, we strategize around what they are planning to do with the different works, how they're planning to publish them online, use them online, things like that. Oftentimes, people don't register their copyrights, and then until something happens. And then again, like I said, at that point, if somebody does rip you off, for example, there is like a window where you can still register your copyright and be able to use that registration to enforce those rights. So it's really, it just depends on what the artist's objectives are at what point it makes most sense.
Okay. You were talking early on about, getting involved in bridging that right left brain and helping artists. Like, how do you help somebody achieve that vision? Like, do they come to you with an idea and you help them flesh that out, or is it already completed stuff that, what role do you play?
All across the board. Sometimes, like today, we had a call with a creative guy that's kind of contemplating a business partnership. You and I had a conversation a number of years ago where you were thinking about entering into a partnership to create a whole line of merchandise around a story and a character that you had developed. And so with some clients, we start talking about it in the very beginning. For other clients, they are already in business, or maybe they're about to have a show somewhere. They're going to be showing their work or commissioning their work, or they're starting to collaborate with other artists and they're thinking through things. So we're really all across the board. And we've also had instances where a creative has come to us and their work has been ripped off, and we've had to, really go to the mattresses for them and defend their rights. So it's really everything. My goal is just to, like I said, to turn creatives into badass business owners, and sometimes to be the bulldog that they need, though most of the time I just prefer to be, like the backstage person, just helping to keep the show moving.
You just reminded me of something, and this is one of my favorite Jess stories of all time.
Gosh.
You and I were on the phone with Kevin in the middle of that deal.
Mhm.
And Kevin's a gnarly Israeli businessman who's been doing it for years and years and years. And they have a huge sportswear company, $60 million sportswear company in the toys. And I've always teased you about your squeaky voice, right? So you're on the phone, and Kevin's thinking he's going to like kind of take over the situation. And he didn't say anything dismissive, but he had the kind of like, oh, she's the girl sort of like mindset on. And in about 3 sentences, with the sweetest, nicest verbiage, you sort of just eviscerated it. And I've seen him trash people so many times over the years, and he all of a sudden he was just sort of crushed back in this chair. I was like, yeah, you became my hero that day. I thought that was just the coolest thing I've ever seen. Hey, you know what? It's like we need Jacob. Can you put up Jess's website, please, before we get out of here? It's Shraybman Law, correct?
Yeah.
.com.
Yeah.
Shraybman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know
Well,
you wanted to talk about like the AI stuff and just if I can just take a minute because this is something that
please.
I feel is very important for creatives. Because a lot of the AI models that are being built are being trained on information that's being like scoured from the internet. And so a lot of artists' works are being used to train these models.
Right.
Um, and there's actually a case right now with a group of visual artists against a platform called Stability AI. And also DeviantArt is one of the defendants. I don't know if you remember DeviantArt.
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to be a huge fan of DeviantArt. It was a platform for artists where they could sell their work, like
It was great.
low commissions. Exactly. I was such a fan. This court case is still very much in the early stages. My hypothesis is that what happened was that when artists were signing up onto this platform, that part of the terms of use of this platform was that DeviantArt could basically sell, transfer, share user information and data with any of its other third-party providers. And that's what happened. By signing up on this platform, artists basically gave up some of their rights. And then
Whoa.
Ability AI comes and partners with a platform like this, and they're able to use pretty much their database of all this information to train their AI models. So, you know, people always ignore the fine print. I spend most of my time in the fine print when it comes to things like that. It's very important. So I now am a lot more conservative and cautioning artists to just really know what they're signing up for when they sign on to platforms, when they are using apps to promote their work and sell their work and things like that. That case in specific, it's Anderson v. Stability AI. That's a case that I'm watching very closely. At this point, the Copyright Office is still saying that copyrights can only be bestowed on human authorship. So things created by artificial intelligence are not eligible for copyright protection, though I think that
At
companies
the
are
moment, though, right? They're gonna,
right,
yeah.
right. And even still, I think companies are finding workarounds for some of those things. But so a lot of these questions are still very much up in the air. I'm watching them very closely, and I'm happy to keep you and your audience up to date as much
I
as
would
it's
love
really
that.
possible. Totally.
Because there's so many things going on, like with music, man. They're putting out whole like Drake albums, like entire albums that are just thought forms in a way, I mean, they're not, and who owns that?
Yeah.
It's like it's really crazy. My first experience with really realizing how in my face AI was now. I was in my Facebook feed and a friend of mine sent me a picture that looked like H.R. Giger had done it. And he goes, "Hey man, what do you think of my painting?" And I get into it, and it turns out that it was made in midheaven. And he typed in a short staircase with a chair with horns on it in an
Funny.
H.R. Giger style. And it gave him in like 10 seconds 20 different versions,
Yeah.
all of which, if you weren't like I'm a fanatic, so I knew his whole catalog, and this was not in it. And
Right.
as you looked at it, you know the way it is. Like AI
Yeah.
looks really good on the surface, but once you like actually look at it, there's
For
just so
now. For
funk.
now. But it's crazy how fast the technology is improving. Because it's like it snowballs on itself. The more it does, the more it trains, the more it learns, the better it gets. And it's
And quantum computing is very close to realization. And when quantum computer thinks a million times faster than the fastest computer that exists now.
mm,
And when that combines with that, I mean, that can go in a lot of really funky areas. And we're already at the point where whole, like, did you hear about the Instagram, like, influencer girl who, like, made it to the top of Instagram, and there were videos and pictures and running communications just like all the other girls, and it turns out that it was an AI construction.
Oh, I've heard that actually that tools like that, like bots and things are they're just used in so many ways. And I mean, I won't get into a whole conversation about like things like OnlyFans and things like that, where people think that they're interacting with real humans, but they're not, and they're just spending like their life savings on these relationships they think they're having. And technology is wild. It's the Wild West. You got to be careful. Again, a lot of great applications, but also a lot of vulnerabilities.
Well, it's just like everything else in human history. You know, the stuff that was developed for really good stuff has good stuff, but people that want to find nefarious uses for things
Mhm.
inevitably find a way to do that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll have to have a follow-up conversation about
You
that.
know, I would very, very, very much enjoy that. Well, listen, we've rocked through the whole hour. Can you believe it?
I know. I thought it was like 20 minutes.
I just want to thank my one of my erstwhile sponsors, Ernie and the gang from Fried Okra TV, man, the amazing films, documentaries, series, friedokra.com. Give them a shout out and
Check
check them
that
out.
out.
And thanks for the support and the help. It's been greatly appreciated. And I really would love for you to like smack Aldrich and ask him if he'd like to come on and talk about the
I
simulation.
will.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
big congratulations, much love
We,
with the new
this was so
kid.
much fun.
You know,
Let's do
you're
it.
glowing. You know, you are one of the you like the first time I met you, your light went boom. And
Aw,
I'm
thanks.
like that big. Yeah, it's been a really crazy ride watching you grow up and blossom and become this amazing, amazing person that I just really respect a lot. So
Aw, thanks, B. Likewise. Love you, buddy.
I'll see you soon. Okay. Thanks again.
Bye, everybody.